Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Bonus file, written by dekuscrubber, Secrets of Pizza, an Angel, and a Message Desperately Needed. My paternal grandmother died of Alzheimer's several years ago, when I was around 18 years old. I had a hard time dealing with her mental decline, because at the same time my bipolar and ADHD symptoms were greatly worsening and I was unable to get treatment that helped. I would just be uncomfortable around her when we went to visit her in the memory care facility, which made me feel guilty. The last time I saw her conscious and awake, I didn't get to hug her because she had snapped at us and went on a nonsensical tirade about her dog being taken from her and was escorted away by hospital staff. I felt horrible about it because I wanted her to remember me in a positive way. In her last moments, if she remembered me at all. She loved me and my brother so much when she was able to. I got a job at a pizza place a year after that, and when I was still sort of new at my job, we got a carry-out order for a customer who was in the early stages of dementia. She had asked me to carry her pizza out to her car because she sometimes has trouble remembering what she's doing, but we had more orders after her, so I forgot to take it out to her and just placed it on the warmer and waited for her to come inside. She came into the store to check on her order, and I realized what she had asked me to do and apologized to her. She shook her head, looked me straight in the eyes and said, very seriously, with a familiar tone, "It wasn't your fault. I forgive you." It felt like it was intended to refer to a much larger mistake than just leaving someone's pizza in a warmer for 10 minutes, and the look on her face was exactly the one my grandma had when she was comforting me as a kid. I immediately started crying and told her she reminded me of someone I had lost, and she winked and told me everything was okay before leaving with her food. After that, I never saw her again, even after working there every single week for more than 2 years. Every time I think of that incident, I laugh at the fact that I believe a messenger angel ordered a pizza from me just to send me the message I desperately needed to hear. Case file number 454, written by MamaCinica. Secrets of an Old Lady Vanishing in a Flash. I, 40 female, went to the supermarket with my husband, 43 male, and my son, 7 male, last week. As usual, he stayed in the car with our son while I went in. They usually park at the parent and child parking spot, right by the main entrance. However, because it was cold and raining, he left me right by the door before parking. 15 minutes or so later, I come out and spot our car right in front of me. I walk by the back window where I see my kid's car seat, but nobody in it. And then as I walk to the front, I see an old lady sitting in the front passenger seat alone. She was gazing towards the front of the car, and I thought, gosh, I almost opened the door to the wrong car. Lucky she's not looking this way, or I could have scared her by trying to get in. So I kept on walking for a couple of meters. It's a small parking lot, and couldn't see our car. So I called my husband. He answers the phone and I asked him where he's parked, and he says, right in front of the store, parent and child parking spot. I turn around and there he is, in the same car, and our child is strapped in his seat. Neither of them saw me or the lady that I saw in the car. I'm still doing mental gymnastics to explain it to myself, unsuccessfully. Case notes, file number 454. So it was the same car, the same make and model, and even had your son's car seat in the back. One would presume it would be reused in the future if you had a second or third son. So I'm wondering if this is more than a parallel universe sightseeing trip, like we so frequently get. Instead, I suspect you somehow glimpsed your future, or rather one possible future. Just by seeing it, you've changed the series of dominoes that would fall to it. I don't know if you wanted to have more kids, but this would prove it possible. Another thing, your husband or son didn't see you approach the car and look inside. That means that you were physically in the future, not just glimpsing it for those few seconds. Otherwise, your family would have seen you looking into the car with a bewildered expression, no doubt. It's worth noting too, future time travel is indeed possible, and we do it all the time at extremely minor levels, nanoseconds, because of gravitational and acceleration frames of reference. But to suddenly jump forward and back, so far, no idea how that could happen physically. Case file number 455, written by Saya-Lux. The secrets of a girl I knew and then forgot about in mid-conversation. I have had some really weird things happen to me throughout my life. The only person who knows them all is my husband, but I have always wanted to reach out and see what others think of my experiences and if anyone else has had similar experiences. This took place when I was a teenager. I believe somewhere between 16 or 17. My dad was a truck driver, and I went with him for a couple weeks in summer. We were in Texas. I believe it was Fort Worth, but I'm not positive. We pulled into a truck stop and got out together to head into the store for something. On our way in, I saw a girl that I instantly recognized. She recognized me as well, and we basically ran into each other. We started enthusiastically catching up like old friends. I remember just being so excited to see her again and asking her how she had been doing. My dad and her dad seemed puzzled when they reached us. Our dads did the whole small talk thing about being truckers, and I really didn't pay attention to what they were saying. After a few minutes, they turned to us and asked us how we knew each other. We both just paused and realized we weren't sure. My dad asked her name, and I realized I had no idea what her name was. She didn't know mine either. Her dad seemed pretty freaked out by this point, but nothing really rattled my dad much. My dad went on to explain that it was my first time ever being out of Pennsylvania, where I was born and raised. Turns out, she had never been out of Texas. We were strangers. Then it was like the moment I realized we hadn't met before. I also suddenly couldn't even remember what we had just been catching up about. I remember asking her how she was doing, but nothing of her response. It was like the conversation disappeared from my memory, fading with the seconds, but I was so sure we had a detailed discussion about our lives just moments before. It became awkward after that, and we parted ways. My dad told me later that he had seen plenty of strange things being a truck driver his whole adult life, and I shouldn't let it bother me. But I still think about her and wonder what happened. I was so sure I knew her, so sure we had been very close, and she was too. But I have no memory of her, and I know I never saw her before or after that. Case file number 456, written by Spectacalur. Secrets of a newspaper stand, brought back to life in an instant. Once a week, for the past 2 years, I've walked to and from a supermarket. On the way, I walked down a long road which has houses on one side and a whole lot of nothing on the other, except for the remains of a little store that sold newspapers and daily essentials. For the past 2 years, I've passed these remains and recalled the time. Around 6 years ago, my friend and I were passing the store, but had to take shelter when the heavens suddenly opened and a heavy storm started. It made me feel a little melancholic to look at the remains, thinking of happier times and so on. What used to be a store that happily served its local community was now barely 3 partially knocked down walls and a pile of rubble. Last week it was 3 walls and a pile of rubble. Today, to my utter astonishment, it's the same store it was 6 years ago. I couldn't really say what it looked like in between then and the past 2 years, as I only moved back to the area 2 years ago. Kind of run down and old looking, but certainly not a pile of rubble. I can't be sure, but I believe it's the same 2 old men running it, who called my friend a cab and I that day as we were caught in a storm. This is my first experience since childhood that I describe as supernatural. Bonus file, written by Nut Bastard. Secrets of Good Boy Charlie, saying goodbye one more time. Had a dog growing up. His name was Charlie. Charlie was a mutt pit and German shepherd mix, and some other stuff too. He was very willful and prone to occasional violence with the other dog, Sam. But for the most part, he was a good dog, even though he ate the arm off my dad's recliner chair and just claimed it as his own. This dog chewed everything: shoes, couches, sticks, and rocks. He also loved to get out of the yard, and it was a poorly fenced 1-acre woodland lot. But because of his aggression problems and his wanderlust, he wore a pretty heavy chain around his neck with a bell and reflectors attached. Anyway, because he chewed everything, my mother bought a supposedly unchewable plastic bone thing for him. First of all, screw whatever company made that thing, because Charlie had no problem chewing through it and swallowing pieces of it too. A piece he swallowed ended up rupturing his intestine, and surgery would have been $6,000 at a predicted success rate of only 20%. We didn't have that kind of money. Mom took him in and had to put him down. Dad buried him in the yard. 10 days later or so, it was me, my brother, and my dad, all up late, just talking, not much going on. Then we all heard it, and we all looked at each other. It was unmistakable. All at once, we heard the click-clack of Charlie's claws on the deck, and the jingling of his chain, and the tiny little jingle bell. It sounded 100% like Charlie was asking to come in. Dad got up, went to the door, and opened it. Nothing was there on the porch, but Dad just stood there with the door fully open for a good 10 seconds, standing off to the side as one would when letting a dog inside. He saw that we were confused and said, "Just want to make sure Charlie got all the way back in." And that was the end of it. Never heard from him again. The only other thing of note here is that my dad did not like dogs or cats until we got Charlie, and Charlie promptly ate his very expensive chair. In some weird way, my dad respected that. Don't ask me why, because I'd need to ask him, and sadly, that's not possible. 3 people, myself included, all heard it at once and knew immediately what the sounds were. The closest neighboring house was half a mile away, and our driveway was steep and long, so any noise was cause for alert. It was a very quiet place. Case notes, bonus file. Oh man, reading this was tough. I've had a few dogs in my life. When they pass, it's almost unbearable. Nothing short of losing a family member can compare, but even then it's a different type of pain. It's a heavy sorrow, a loss that you can't wish away. Time does help, but still, you remember them. Charlie came back just one more time, maybe just to let his old family know he's doing okay. I wonder if they have doggy treats in heaven. They must, right?